Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Canadians with Disabilities and Their Allies. I'm your host, Brent, the Weatherman. Settle in and get ready for a conversation with our topic of today. It's definitely a huge topic for discussion for today because a lot of people are really not sure difference between a subsidized housing versus market housing. There's different sectors of market housing. There's for-profit, and then there's private sector versus public sector. It can get quite confusing when people are not really familiar. I wasn't really familiar when there was private and public sector for subsidized housing, right?
Yeah, no, totally. And there's so many. The thing with it is that there's so many varying. How do you want to call it? Levels. So there's like me personally, for example, I consider supportive housing exactly what it sounds like. Supportive housing. You got supports, whether it be for disabilities or maybe addiction issues or mental health issues, whatever. And then there's, like you said, I hate that term affordable housing because it confuses the heck out of everybody.
It does, because I was actually speaking with an MLA regarding affordable housing. Now I said, well, who is it affordable to? Based on your income. Somebody could be making $300,000 a year. Well, it may be affordable to them, but not to the average citizen, right? So, and then it comes to the market housing. There's private sector versus public sector. Now, that's a discussion in itself because, people who are on disability assistance in the province that they live in Canada, if they get their shelter portion within, say they're living in market housing, they can't actually get subsidized housing. They can't get their rent subsidized due to say below market rent. That's one thing I found out. Yeah, it's not basically an even playing field. It is evil. Because really, it's kind of playing each disabled person against each disabled person. Well, hey, you choose to live in market housing. Well, you're going to pay the high market rent, as high as the market will bear, right? Versus subsidized housing, where you're not paying more than 30% of your income, and that's where a lot of people say, well, how come I can't pay 30% of my income in market housing? And it should. They have they call the shelter. They call it the shelter allowance in market housing that disabled people get in each province, right? So if they eliminated that shelter portion and extended over, there's seniors, a lot of people, they don't understand all the different ins and outs, but there's a lot of programs that are available for subsidized housing within the other sectors. Seniors do get it. They get a what is it? It's Safers. It's in BC. They call it Safers. It's a seniors. It's a branch off of their housing provider, and so or even low income mothers or family. If they want reduced rent, they can just apply for that, and actually it's a subsidized amount for them. And they can actually get that. They just submit the paperwork in, show your tax form of what your income is, and they can actually get that subsidized amount. And they can still live in market housing. They don't have to be in a housing through a housing provider, because they can still live in their same home. If their rent is say $2,000-$3,000 and they're getting that subsidy, yeah, they can still stay there, and they just paying that small portion, and then the rest is actually subsidized. I'd like to see it extended right across the board, because I think it would basically make a lot more housing available for people, because there's empty homes that are sitting there right now.
Oh, totally.
That can be, and they can be utilized. Big time. There's a city I grew up in. There's a lot of condos there, very expensive condos, very nice ones, but nobody can afford to live on it, especially if you're on disability, right?
And where are you, in BC?
I'm in BC. I'm in Victoria. I used to live in Langley, but I had to move away from Langley because I got priced out. I couldn't afford $1,775. That was just way too expensive. But if I had subsidized it's rent geared to income, right? So
Yeah.
if it was the same thing, so if it was geared that way, I could have stayed in where I'm living. Me and my roommate, we could have stayed living there, but we couldn't afford it. Like we were paying like 75% of our income to rent, so it was just crazy. And we have a place in Victoria. I mean, it's a roof over our head. I mean, it's a pretty dated building. I mean, a lot of places here are really old, but I mean, it's doable. Until we can find something that is going to be suitable for us. Yeah,
Nothing.
it, it makes it very frustrating for sure.
Oh,
And yeah, yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, a lot of insight on what you're going through, or I mean, what you went through. I mean, that's it's actually quite informative because basically a lot of people are probably going through the same thing.
exactly.
Uh,
Exactly. But these are the stories that you don't hear about, right?
there's a lot of similar parts of the program, I think, that are in each province. I mean, each province probably has its own guidelines, but I think a lot of it's just income inequalities to match the what the demand is for housing and the criteria, and it should be all even right across the board. I mean, nobody should really have to choose between deciding, well, I can't live there or I can't live there, and um, yeah, like there's so many changes that need to happen with legislation for sure because it's actually literally pricing people out, even people who don't even have a disability. I mean, they are low income or whatever, or middle class. I mean, they're struggling. I mean, the price of housing in BC alone. I'm looking at the prices across the country, but Victoria is the number one priciest city in the whole country.
What's the average?
A recent yeah, the recent chart came out. I'm going, well, yeah, I can see that. And Vancouver's the next priciest one. Then, of course, the inflation hasn't really helped the situation either because inflation has driven up the price demand for everything, including housing, automobiles, gas. I mean, you name it, electricity, cable. I mean, all your basic stuff, right? And I mean, each province actually has its own issues, definitely that have to be worked out. But I think that a lot of them, like I said, have similar characteristics with their programs that are in place. Because, like I say, nobody should have to choose between having housing or not. And that's why, I mean, there's so many people living in tents because they just can't afford the market rent. And then they say the cities go, oh no, you can't be on this land because that's just wrong. Well, it is wrong. I mean, nobody should have to live in a tent when it's minus 30 or minus 50 out or any kind of conditions, really. There's different things that people are going through regarding subsidized housing. It's some people had their perception. I mean, Dan would know too, but their perception thinking like subsidized housing is the best of the best of the best. Not necessarily, right? I mean, it's a roof over her head. Sonia lived in subsidized housing at one time, and she she could tell her story regarding that, and things would break down. And they would like, oh yeah, we'll get to it eventually, etc. Um, the difference is that between market housing is that people feel that they have more freedom in market housing, but some yes, sometimes no. Because in market housing, yeah, you can have guests over, but if the landlord finds out that you have guests over for a period of time, then they can kind of put a little fear into people, saying, well, we're gonna jack up your rent by $200, $300, for a period of time. In subsidized housing, it's the same thing. You have to tell them when you have guests over, and if you don't, then there's a problem, right? It's a little bit freedom within market housing because you don't have to submit in to the government each year stating that what your income is to see if you still qualify for subsidized or for market housing. You just pay the high market rent. So that's what I've learned with a few of the equations on it, and I just think it needs to be a playing field right across the board, so that nobody pays more than 30% of their housing because, like Lalani would say, yeah, it's a human right, and it is a human right issue, right? I mean, nobody should have to choose between should they pay for their cable or should they pay for their hydro? Yeah, worst case scenario, pay for their hydro, pay for their rent. Well, if you don't have your hydro, I mean, you can't run anything. So, I mean, it's kind of like a common ground that we all learn from each other. Everyone has their opinions. Like someone got into a big debate one day about housing with somebody. Well, why don't you just go if you don't tired? Whether man, if you're tired of living in market housing, just go to subsidized housing. Well, you know what I mean? Like, why? Like, the system's broken. Like, we got to fix it. Like, why have a person move to go to something else where maybe they're happy where they are, right? So we have to kind of work with the situation rather than, like Anime said, like the system's designed that way, right? Kishon Roy. Oh, hey, can you hear me? Kishon. Why? Well, I can't. Can you unmute your microphone? Maybe he's using a laptop.
Yeah, I can hear. Just.
You can. Oh, okay. Go ahead. Yeah. Great. You're an awesome advocate. You guys. Sorry, I didn't mean to just also cut in there, but go ahead, Kishon, if you'd like to say a few things or take your time.
No, I just clicked in to listen for a bit.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Kishon Roy, he's a strong advocate when it comes to the 375 issue too. Actually, Kishon, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what's your view about the 375 issue?
I find it infuriating. I don't know what it's going to take sometimes to convince governments that people deserve the basic necessities of life. I don't think they understand the situation for people who are receiving this amount. I don't think anybody who are in positions of power has ever lived on that kind of amount. I think it's an insult to people with disabilities. I wake up every day and think about it and get angry.
What is 375?
Kishon?
Brent, you know?
Yes. The 375 is the shelter allowance for persons with disabilities and income assistance in the province of British Columbia. It's been frozen for 14 years, 9 months. April 1st, 2007 was the last time it was increased to 375. Prior to that was February 1992. It was at $325. So you can imagine... all the way from 1992 all the way till now we're in 2022, so that's a long time. Like, you can't rent, you can't even rent a doghouse. You could maybe buy a tent for that price, like a good tent, but here's the thing: if you don't have a physical address, like say you're sharing somebody's place, couch surfing, maybe you're that's all you can afford. You can only afford to sleep on a couch. Well, unfortunately, if you're there for like a week, 2 weeks, and then you got to go to another buddy's house, it's a no fixed address. You do not get that shelter allowance. So that's the bad part. Then you get your support portion, but your support portion is still not enough now to basically even get a housing. So the system's broken, right? It has to be fixed. So if you're in subsidized housing, you don't have to worry about that 375 issue because your rent is geared to your income. So that 375 issue is not even relevant. Like, it's not even part of the equation. But if you're in market housing, it is part of the equation. But if you can't say that you have a place to live, and they check on that, they verify with your landlord, is the applicant going to be living there? Yes. Okay, you get your 375. If they can't prove that, you do not get it.